Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I'm extremely excited for today's episode, particularly because we have not done a Let's Get Banned episode in, I think, quite some time now, probably 2 or 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if some of you will forgive me, I am a little bit under the weather, feeling a little bit run down, but that did not stop me from wanting to come out with today's episode for all of you. Now, I do not know yet as of if this will stay just for members and then go public or just permanently stay for members. I'm leaning more towards it just staying for members because of some of the things we'll be covering here, but let's dive right into it and let's get right down to it. So today's title of today's Let's Get Banned is Rife's Cancer Cures, the virus of the mind, and why r/anti-work is lethal. So let's get right down to it. What I'm going to do for you folks is I'm going to share a particular video from 1942, and many of you may have heard already of the Rife cancer curing machine and all of that, but it's one thing to have documents and to potentially substantiate the documents and what have you. It's another thing to have another entirely, dare I say, accurate piece of footage, accurate relative to the data in which we are seeing disseminated from the military intelligence community, in addition to that of the spiritual community, whether they're deliberate, quote unquote, leaks or otherwise, is for a different conversation. But there are stark similarities in the data points of some of the things we're looking at here. So I'm going to be playing this for you folks. And again, it's about 2 minutes in length, and then we're going to proceed with some other very interesting things. So let's take a look.
His assistance around the whole area. This shows the virus after it's been treated with the ray tube instruments.
So we see here, this is showing the virus, any virus in whether an animal or a human in 1942 being treated with these particular ray tube, if I'm not mistaken, instruments, which emit an extremely strong electrical spark and charge that immediately just eliminates the virus.
Which has a resonant frequency that killed the virus, and they're all clumped together, agglutinating in the field. This shows the ray colors, not the colors, but the ray emanations. You'll see the colors pretty soon. The lethal frequencies of the electromagnetic emanations are shown here in these first slides ever made of oscilloscope patterns, which were shown in the Detroit Electronic Convention in 1942. The spikes of these frequencies are primarily the killers of the virus, which actually the internal energy.
The spikes in the frequencies are ultimately the killer of the virus. Interesting.
Is built up in the virus, and they just disintegrate into pieces, so there is no life left to grow again. The various frequencies that can be generated by an audio oscillator are put on a carrier wave in the diathermy range, which range from 13 million cycles per second up to 42 million cycles per second. And this shows the amplification of the
14 million cycles per second, I think, if I'm not mistaken, to very, very substantial, many million cycles per second. Now, let's keep in mind, again, the frequency measure, excuse me, the measurement, we could say indicator or threshold, which was that of the Hertz measurement, replaced CPS or cycles per second in the 1960s. Again, interesting, right? When we look at the chronology of the timeline of things relative to not just any UAP activity, but relative to the overall archetypal understanding of our society and species as a collective. I'm not talking just World War II and onward. I'm talking many hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Signal going into the carrier wave, and the slower frequencies now are being shown, which they can be varied with harmonics and other square wave waveforms that were later transmitted up through the 40-inch bellows of the Leeds optical bench so that photomicrographs could be made of the bacteria and other entities. This is a number 2 microscope. This is a number 4 microscope built by Rife and his assistants. Rife was a great machinist, had a tool and die maker working with him at all times. These are the controls of the instrument. That's a fine adjustment and the coarse adjustment on the top and the back.
All right, so we see that there, right? We see very clearly that this seemed to occur right now with respects to where Mr. Rife got his funding and what have you. Unfortunately, I can't get into that publicly for now for the time being, but because it leads back to a lot of other things. But ultimately, it's there. It was there. What happened to it? Right now, that takes us to the next point in today's presentation of our Let's Get Banned, which is quite specifically and in a quite peculiar sense, as a matter of fact, that takes us to this right over here, which is specifically Dr. James Giordano, the 42-minute mark of a presentation he gave a handful of years ago, 5 years ago, as of the time we're recording this, at the 42-minute mark. And let's take a look at what we're watching here.
Can I alter their cognition? Can I alter their affiliation? Can I alter their emotionality? And in such a way, might I be able to alter their behavior? Yeah, I can. And if in fact this individual possesses political or charismatic capability, charm, charisma, leadership potential, to then stand before their people and say, this guy's my best buddy now, they might go, well, I'm following this guy. Or they might think he's stark raving mad and I've created social disruption within his political ranks. I can do that on a variety of levels. From individuals who are head of a small family or group, to the tribal, to the community, to the large-scale population. So we can utilize these things to be able to affect key operators and dynamic individuals who may charismatically, politically, or through other means of power be able to affect groups. It's a ripple effect. It is a ripple effect. Moreover,
Ripple effect. Remember, folks, but whether those that are new to the Patreon or those that have been on the member side for quite some time, look at how often we speak on fractals, ripples, the same way you drop a rock into a pond and you see the ripple wave is quite similar to that of a Wi-Fi symbol in the way that the ripples start small and then they exponentially increase in their depth, width, density, frequency even. But we'll get to that shortly. Pay very close attention, I kindly ask.
We can induce a number of neuromicrobiological agents to then incur something called high morbidity. These are not necessarily mortal agents. We can modify the existing palette of bacteria and viruses through the use of gene editing techniques, very viable. This has been some of my ongoing work with my colleague Diane Diulis at National Defense University. And what we can also do is recognize that there are existing microbiologicals that can be harnessed to then induce the effects. We can also engage certain chemicals that way. What we want here is a morbidity factor, not necessarily a mortality factor. I want to make people sick. And what I do here is the virus is not necessarily the bug. The virus is what I put over the internet.
The virus is not necessarily the bug in terms of an actual, viral entity or something like this. Allegedly, that is spreading, but the virus is not necessarily the key virus in a multitude of a multi-pronged operation here is not the actual bug. It's what's put on the internet.
Let me show you how I can crash a system pretty easily. I affect key individuals here, here, and here. And then I take another community in the back of the room. I affect key individuals there. And then I take another community. I affect key individuals there. And then I do what every good attributional group does. I beat my chest and take credit for it. And what I put out over the internet is, this is a virus, a bacteria, an agent that I have infiltrated into your fill in the blank.
Now, keep in mind, folks, I'm not saying that the physical aspect of this operation being in this particular subset of the operation, the virus, I'm not saying it is fake. It may, in fact, infect some people. But again, it's what is convinced and then sent through the nervous system, through the neurological, we could say, thought forms relative to that of emergence of physics and metaphysics. Ultimately, it's what goes through the mind, and not just locally, not just in our mind in the sense of our brain here, like, the brain underneath your and my skull. It goes past that, but we'll get into that.
I say it's a weapon of mass destruction, and what I tell you it's going to do is it's going to produce paranoia, anxiety, and sleeplessness. What I've just done is I've recruited every paranoid hypochondriac to think that they have whatever that is. I've used salient and sentinel cases, and I create essentially a legion of what's known as the worried well. They now flood emergency rooms. They flood their clinicians. The CDC responds back and says, no, 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 there is no such a thing. And I've created a schism of trust between the population and the polis. It's both a short and a long war's effect.
You've created mistrust right off the bat. Whether you are, say, for example, a group, an entity, a tribe, you name it, or even just a couple guys in your in your parents' basement, just trying to, with extremely strong hacking skills. Right now, again, don't get me wrong, I'm scaling that down. There are a couple guys in their basement would need far more resources to enable an operation like this. Don't get me wrong, but we see how, again, the dare I say, the battlefield is that in which is of within the mind, and we will bring this full circle shortly, I assure you, folks.
Moreover, I can create particular neuromicrobiologicals that may have a much longer duration of action, for example, modified Zika virus. And what I can then do is, as a consequence of that, is I can affect subsequent generations to incur a public health morbidity and mortality effect that then creates an increased economic and perhaps social burden. Long war scenario.
All right, you see how he just said right there, long war scenario? I've been speaking to some of you specifically. I'm speaking to the members off the records more so specifically lately. But what I want to share in particular is something that is, my gosh, when I say I'm, dare I say, blown away, and not particularly in a, for lack of a better term, a benevolent sense, I really do mean that. And what I mean by that is particularly what I want to share is this right over here. So let's take a look, folks, very quickly at this particular article. See this right over here? r/Antiwork boasts over 1 million members on Reddit, right? We see actually 2.3 million, excuse me, right? We see here 16.9 thousand not working. Again, that just signifies or denotes the amount of people online at this moment. Now, here's what I want to say before many of you go, oh my gosh, Dave, what are you showing us? Well, there have been many subreddits like this in the past in which have been shut down, temporarily halted, you name it. And you may be thinking, Dave, similar to the GameStop stock trading scenario. Precisely. Why? Because let me put it very simply. Leaders, regardless of political party, right? They will always say, oh, we have to come together, come together. But when people actually come together genuinely, they go, no, 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 not like that, not like that, right? Now, with that said, that then asks us one question. What does that mean? Okay, well, we see r/Antiwork. Don't get me wrong, it may be comprised of some people that genuinely don't want to work and are genuinely lazy and things like this, but it speaks to a larger collective of things. And what do I mean by that? Well, it speaks to this idea that people are now asking themselves, what do I want out of my life? Okay, sure, I have my job, I have my mortgage, I have my kids, but then what? There's something I'm missing. I feel I need more. Or I not just need, I'm craving for more. Now, many could say that is the spiritual, lack of a better term, hunger or immaturity that our tangible and material and physical society lacks to provide us, and perhaps deliberately. But I'm not going to jump to that conclusion. We then have to ask ourselves, okay, let's think about things like this, for example, right? Phys.org, scientists discover exotic quantum state at room temperature, right? What does that mean to the average person? Right? And this is ideally the situation, in my humble opinion, that is done on purpose. Now, again, researchers at Princeton University found that a material known as a topological insulator. Yeah. Okay. Look, long story short, they cracked this stuff in the 1950s. This is a slow dissemination to then industrialize through the commercial and consumer market, consumer products that can affect the brain in the ways we just watched. Now, why do I say that? Well, take a look at this. MedicalExpress.com. This is all in the last 72 hours, these articles, by the way, folks. Huge unveiling of schizophrenia brain cells show new treatment targets. Well, I'm not trying to speak on everyone with mental health issues or with schizophrenic or ADHD issues or, bipolar disorder, things like this. But what if a lot of these quote unquote disorders or issues could be immediately resolved, or at the very least mitigated and brought down substantially, so people can be a bit more relaxed using the technology in the video we watched at the very beginning of this episode? But no, that's never discussed. Never, right? Now, the reason I bring this up, okay, folks, is because we have to ask ourselves, what if, not all, but what if X amount of people, I don't claim to know the percentage, not at all, but what if schizophrenic people, X amount of ADHD people, X amount of so-and-so people are people in which are able to be spiritually omnipresent. Now, when I say that, you may say, Dave, okay, you say spiritual, but what about the nuts and bolts? Very simple. In the nuts and bolts world, the material world, we got solids, liquids, and gases. What's above a gas? What comes next after a gas? A light wave, perhaps, like sort of like when you shoot out a laser beam. Well, when you shoot a laser beam, run your hand through the beam. You don't necessarily feel anything, but the beam is there, right? What if that is what our, dare I say, our soul, our chi, our prana may be closer to existing within, a frame of reference that is outside of our current spectrum? And the reason I say that is because take a look at this. SingularityHub.com. Again, articles on the last 72 hours. Our conscious experience of the world is but a memory, says a new theory. And then scientificamerican.com, quantum physics. Again, what does quantum mean? But let's take a look. The universe is not locally real, and the physics Nobel Prize winners proved it. The universe is not locally real, meaning the things around us are not quote unquote real. Well, what is real? Well, again, it speaks to this idea that the virus is not necessarily, and I'm not speaking about COVID, just to be very clear, I'm speaking just in general. It's more of a mind game, as we saw here, right? Than that of, for example, a local, tangible, material, real game. And the reason I say that is because elegant experiments with entangled light, you mean like using lasers, have laid bare a profound mystery at the heart of reality. Local means objects can only be influenced by their surroundings, and that any influence cannot travel faster than light. I'm just going to not comment on anything there. And the reason I say that is because taking it back to the idea of schizophrenia and understanding who we are, and not just for mental health issues, but even for what do I want out of my life? I don't have I have a nice home, I got some money saved up, but I'm not happy internally. Or maybe there's something, I am happy, but something feels missing. Well, this takes us then back to r/anti-work, in the sense that you have a lot of people that are saying, for example, why do I have to slave my ass off while we have people in which I'm working for up the chain? They're on nice boats, they're relaxing in their home during the day. I mean, it's genuinely a valid argument. What makes them any better than us? Well, the question then becomes ultimately, how can we resolve this? Well, there are people within r/anti-work that have begun loaning out money to other people who they don't even know, who have said, listen, just, you're in debt, or you have a situation that, financially you can't handle. Pay me back in 3-4 months from now with no interest on the loan. Some people I've even seen in the subreddit, they're saying things like, just don't pay me back, don't worry about it. There were certain situations in other subreddits where you had millionaires, not super, not like mega rich, but wealthy individuals who would come in and say, hey, everyone, to small groups within these types of subreddits and say, hey, let me help all of you, because by helping all of you, don't pay me back even the principal on the loan. Forget any interest. I'm not a loan shark. Don't even pay me back the principal. And we can all help each other. The system becomes self-sustainable. The community within it becomes self-sustainable. You folks see what I'm saying? There goes the need for property taxes. There goes the need for many other things. But let's take this down, or let's bring this back to the science aspect of it. This is when we can merge what we call the physics with the metaphysics, the world of the very large, the world of the very small. What do I mean by that? Well, we've talked about, and this may be new for the new members that have joined. Welcome, by the way, welcome to the family, as we say, but we've talked about in the past year very avidly and extensively that, again, I don't mean to trip anybody out here for lack of a better term, but everywhere you look, whether you're driving, whether you're at home right now, watching or listening to this, everywhere you look is a 90-degree right angle, okay? Everywhere we look is a 90-degree right angle. The question becomes, okay, well, if we are the source of our perception and our perspective of what we perceive to be objects moving in all of this, right? We see things in a 90-degree right angle, like in this regard. Now, the question becomes, people say, for example, the war in Ukraine, people will say, Dave, why aren't Putin and the West, why aren't they using this UAP tech and things like this if they have it? Why aren't they using technologies to cure cancers or things like this if they have it? Like in the video we watched in the beginning, I would dare to say very humbly, I could be wrong, but very humbly, my postulation here is they are, except they're using it and doing it outside of our current spectrum of heat, light, and nervous system observability. What do I mean by nervous system observability? What I mean by that very specifically is this right over here. I do not mean to fearmonger, but dare I say, this may be more legitimate than a lot of people may think with respects to, again, something is being pulsed and fed into a nervous system that has been, dare I say, metaphorically or literally grafted over top some type of energy light wave in another, dare I say, dimension, reality, realm that has then fed into a substrate of a confined vicinity that we know as the 90-degree right angle world we're living in which our carbon bodies are just one, we could say, slice of that full pizza. Imagine you existing as a full pizza, but only knowing or existing in one slice of it the whole time. But you say to yourself, my gosh, I want to be able to jump around on all the other slices. Well, imagine that someone with schizophrenia or ADHD lacking the capability to access that omnipresent capability. And the reason I bring all this up, folks, is we'll use the data-driven science to substantiate this in a moment. But it's getting to the point where they have to start doing this. I mean, think of, again, this is a Corey Good video, and I'm going to be very honest with you folks. Personally, I'm not particularly a fan, but I don't, judge anyone else who does or anything like this. But look at the warning from Wikipedia. Reptilian humanoid. They have to start warning people that reptilian humanoids or anthropomorphic reptiles are fictional creatures that appear in folklore, fiction, and conspiracy theories, almost like if enough people believe in it. Like we watched in the video, the virus is not what I put on out in the public. It's what I put over the internet to influence the belief system. It's almost as if enough people believe in it, it becomes real. Or if these reptilians were real and hiding themselves, they're, for lack of a better term, their information structure overlaying of how they were to hide themselves within our 90-degree vicinity of observability and experience and sensory touch becomes more opened up. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's go right back to this particular page right over here. So if we see things only in a 90-degree right angle vector state, right, which, by the way, if you look at all the universities and all that, everything is calculated within only one polarization of the photon. Their quantum takes two, perhaps three, but anyways, it's a whole other thing. But the point is that when people say, Dave, why isn't this stuff happening? Why aren't Putin using his UAP tech if he's got it? He is. They are, except outside of our observability and interactivity, experience, you name it, reality, limited spectrum, right? Now, here's what's equally as interesting. Think about something like this. What if I drew another person next to this person here? I'm just using a different color to denote, to signify a different person there. And this person, their viewpoint started here, and they were viewing this slice of the pizza or pie. Now, what if another person came in, right? We're going to use blue here, and I'm going to draw, say, someone over here, right? This person came in and said, hey, I'm going to observe this part of the pie. Now, I'm oversimplifying the way one can get out of this, dare I say, 90-degree, this green right angle vector state. But you see where I'm going here, folks? Each color represents a different person or individual, which speaks to the idea of working together. This idea, and I'm not trying to say, kumbaya, everyone's happy by the fire. Life is rough. I'm not going to sit here and say it's everything's nice and easy. But the more we realize that what we call disagreements may in fact be different perspectives of similar scenarios. Notice how now we have encompassed the full circle. Let me just use a white color here for the sake of it. I'm not drawing the people, the yellow person and the white person, because you guys get the point. But you see how when one comes together, the full slice of the pizza is brought together, kind of like r/anti-work. And you may say, Dave, what do you mean by that? Well, say red stick man is not doing well financially. Well, blue stick man will pick up the slack and help him out until red stick man gets better, either pays back blue stick man, or stick man then needs a little bit of rest because he took up a lot of the weight, whether financially or energetically, of red man. Then we see, for example, black man, white man, blue man, they all start helping each other out. You see what I'm saying here, folks? And now take a look at this, by the way. Not only does this speak to the Platonic solids, but it speaks to this idea that the universe is not locally real, and the physics Nobel Prize winners proved it. It also speaks to Maxwell's quaternions, James C. Maxwell's quaternions, right? It also speaks to the way in which Maxwell's quaternions could be perturbed or moved or things like this within the space-time metric. But how could that be possible if we're only experiencing one angle of it, where my mouse is here? You folks see what I'm saying? This is why, dare I say, ideas are more lethal than anything physical or tangible. The concept of thought and what we're thinking, either as an individual or as a collective, is constantly being monitored, right? Which, I mean, go back to the episode we just put out publicly Saturday with respects to DARPA, its 2011 article looking to master propaganda narrative networks. Again, and now what if people, for example, with mental health issues, not all, but say, for example, some, just so happen to be people that are trying to do multiple tasks in multiple different areas outside of the 90-degree right angle vector in the green one in which we currently reside, experience, live within. You folks see what I'm saying? Again, you're involving the super system and not just the local system, whether scientifically, philosophically, ontologically, you name it. So let me know what you think, folks. I know this has been quite a presentation, but I hope you folks see what I'm seeing or trying to convey in this regard. And I hope, as a matter of fact, I really do mean this genuinely, I hope you folks see things here that I simply didn't. Please comment below on the Patreon side, and we'll catch all of you later today for those that are watching this before our group Zoom that we have scheduled for the members. Cheers.